Captain Lee Minho pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the communication tower. His breathing was heavy and painful. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead down into his left eye. The taste of metal and smoke filled his mouth. Through the broken windows above him, he could see the orange glow of fires burning across what used to be the mining station of New Seoul. The sounds of battle had stopped 15 minutes ago. That was not a good sign. When the shooting stops, it usually means one side has won, and Minho knew it was not his side. He checked his rifle. 3 bullets left. Not enough to fight his way out. Not nearly enough to make any real difference. The Vorthak warriors were probably already searching the buildings for survivors. They would find him soon. Minho touched the communication device on his belt. It was still working. The small green light blinked steadily. He could still send messages across space to other human colonies. But what was the point now? There were no other colonies left to contact. The war had been going on for 15 years. Minho was just a boy when it started. He remembered the first news reports about strange crystalline ships appearing near the outer colonies. The reporters called them beautiful. They looked like floating diamonds, catching starlight. No one thought they were dangerous. They were wrong. The Vorthak Empire had been moving through this part of the galaxy for hundreds of years. They conquered world after world. They took resources and turned planets into mining operations. Any species that fought back was destroyed completely. The Vorthak did not take prisoners. They did not make deals. They simply won. Humanity had tried to fight. Earth built the largest space fleet in human history. They trained millions of soldiers. They created new weapons and new ships. For 15 years, humans fought bravely across dozens of star systems. It was not enough. One by one, the human colonies fell. Mars was attacked 3 months ago. The orbital stations around Jupiter went dark 2 weeks later. Yesterday, Minho received the final transmission from Earth. The homeworld was under attack. The orbital defense grid had failed. The message ended in the middle of a sentence. Minho was now the last human soldier in this entire sector of space. His unit of 43 Marines had been defending New Seoul for 6 days. This morning there had been 12 of them left. An hour ago there had been 3. Now there was only him. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Not from fear exactly, but from something deeper. The weight of being the last one. The knowledge that when he died, there would be no more humans left to remember this place. No one to remember his friends who had died here. No one to remember that humanity had tried to make a stand. The communication device beeped softly. Minho picked it up and stared at the small screen. It was set to broadcast on all frequencies. Any human ship or station still operating would receive whatever he sent. But there probably were no human ships left. There probably were no stations still operating. Still, he had to try. Someone needed to know what happened here. Minho pressed the record button and began to speak. This is Captain Lee Minho of the Terran Defense Corps, stationed at New Seoul Mining Station, Kepler 442b. If anyone receives this message, know that we held this position for 6 days against overwhelming enemy forces. My Marines fought with honor. They died with honor. He paused and wiped blood from his eye. The Vorthak ground forces have taken the station. I am the only survivor from my unit, possibly the only human left in this sector. Earth has gone silent. I believe the home world has fallen. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. He cleared his throat and continued. To anyone who might hear this message, remember that we did not surrender. Remember that humanity fought to the end. Remember that we were here. Minho ended the recording and set the device to transmit. The message would broadcast across space for hours, maybe days until the power ran out. Heavy footsteps echoed from the stairwell below. The Vorthak had found the tower. They were coming up. Minho checked his rifle one more time. 3 bullets. He could take at least one of them with him, maybe 2 if he was lucky. It would not change anything, but it would mean something. It would mean he had not given up. The footsteps grew louder. Multiple soldiers. They were moving carefully but steadily. Professional, experienced. These were not the mindless monsters that human propaganda had made them out to be. They were skilled warriors who had conquered half the galaxy. Minho thought about his family back on Earth. His parents had been living in Busan when the war started. His sister had been studying at university in Seoul. He wondered if they had survived the final attack. He hoped they had died quickly if the end had come. The footsteps reached the floor below him. Soon they would be here. Minho closed his eyes and tried to remember something good, something from before the war. He thought about his grandmother. She had raised him after his parents died in a transport accident. She used to sing to him when he was scared or hurt. Old Korean songs that her grandmother had taught her, songs that went back hundreds of years. Without thinking, Minho began to hum one of those songs. Ari Rang. The melody his grandmother had sung to him on countless nights when he could not sleep. The humming became soft singing. The words came back to him as if his grandmother was there whispering them in his ear. Arirang, Arirang, Arario, Arirang, Gogairo, Neomeoganda. His voice grew stronger. The song filled the small room. It felt good to sing. It felt like coming home. 나를 버리고 가시는 님은 십니다 못 가서서 발병난다. The song was about crossing a mountain pass, about someone leaving, and the sadness of being left behind. It was perfect for this moment, perfect for being the last one. Minho sang louder. He did not care if the Vorthak heard him. Let them come. Let them find him singing the songs of his people. Let them know that humans created beautiful things, not just weapons and wars. The footsteps had stopped. Everything was quiet, except for his voice carrying the ancient melody up through the broken tower and out into the alien sky above. War Prime Kale stopped on the stairs. His crystalline body shimmered with confusion. The sound coming from above was unlike anything he had heard in 300 years of conquest. Behind him, Lieutenant Nara also froze. Her younger form pulsed, with curious light patterns. The human was making organized sounds, but these sounds were different from their screams of pain or shouts of anger. These sounds had structure. They had meaning. War Prime, Nara whispered through their harmonic communication. The human is creating sound patterns similar to our meditation frequencies. Kyle raised one clawed hand for silence. He had heard human voices before, thousands of them. They spoke in harsh, chaotic bursts. They screamed when afraid. They shouted orders in battle. But this was something new. The human was producing long, flowing tones that rose and fell like ocean waves. The song continued from the room above. The melody was simple but haunting. It spoke of sadness but also of beauty. It reminded Kale of the crystal caves on his home world, where young Vorthak learned to sing their first harmonies. "Should we advance, War Prime?" Nara asked. Kale did not answer immediately. He was listening, really listening. The human voice carried emotions that Kale recognized, but had never heard expressed this way. There was longing in the tone. There was loss. There was also something else, something that felt like home. For the first time in his military career, Kyle felt unsure about what to do next. The song ended, but immediately the human began another one. This melody was different, faster, more complex. The human voice danced through notes that created pictures in Kale's mind. He saw mountains and rivers. He saw families gathered together. He saw love and joy and all the things that made life worth living. War Prime Kyle, the voice of Admiral Gina, came through his communication device. "What is your status? Why have you stopped advancing?" Kyle struggled to find words. How could he explain what he was hearing? How could he describe the way these sounds were affecting his warrior mind? "Admiral," he said carefully, "the final human is producing harmonic patterns. They are unusual." "Harmonic patterns?" Admiral Gina's voice carried surprise. "Humans do not create harmonic patterns. They only make noise." "With respect, Admiral, I believe we may have been wrong about that." There was silence on the communication channel. Admiral Gina had commanded Vorthak fleets for 2 centuries. She had studied dozens of conquered species. She knew their capabilities and their limitations. Humans were classified as a simple warrior race. They built weapons and fought wars. They did not create art. "Transmit the audio to my ship," Admiral Gina ordered. Kale activated his recording systems and broadcast the humans singing to the flagship. Within moments, the response came back. "All units, halt advancement. Maintain positions. Do not engage." The human. Nara looked at Kale with confusion pulsing through her crystalline form. In all her years of service, she had never heard such an order. The Vorthak always completed their missions. They never stopped because of enemy action. They certainly never stopped because of sounds. But as she listened to the human sing, she began to understand. The voice was telling a story. Not in words she could understand, but in tones and rhythms that spoke directly to something deep inside her consciousness. The human was sharing his culture, his history, his very soul through organized sound. "War Prime," she said quietly. "I think the human is creating what we call meaning song." Kale nodded slowly. Meaning song was the highest form of Vorthak, art. It was how they expressed their most important ideas and emotions. It was how they connected with the divine harmony of the universe. But meaning song was supposed to be unique to the Vorthak. No other species had ever demonstrated the ability to create it. Yet here was a human, the last survivor of a destroyed race, singing meaning song that was more beautiful than anything Kale had heard from his own people. The human's voice grew, stronger. He was singing with more confidence now, as if the act of singing was giving him strength. The melody climbed higher, reaching notes that made the metal walls of the tower ring like bells. Then it fell to low, deep tones that seemed to come from the center of the planet itself. Other Vorthak warriors began to arrive at the base of the tower. They had been sent to support Kale's unit in the final assault. But like Kale and Nara, they found themselves unable to move forward. They stood in the rubble-filled street, looking up at the tower, listening to the impossible sounds coming from within. "What should we do?" asked Sergeant Tomo, the leader of the support unit. "We listen," Kale replied. More warriors arrived, then more. Soon, an entire company of Vorthak soldiers stood in the ruins of New Sol, their weapons lowered, their attention focused on the human song. Word spread through their communication networks. Reports reached every unit on the planet and every ship in the fleet. The human was singing, and somehow, his song was more important than the war. On the flagship, Admiral Gina sat in her command chamber, trying to understand what she was hearing. The audio transmission filled the space around her with sounds that challenged everything she believed about humans and about war itself. Dr. Yuna, the fleet's chief scientist, entered the chamber. Her form glowed with excitement. "Admiral," she said, "I have been analyzing the human's vocal patterns. This is extraordinary." "Explain." "The human is not just making random sounds. He is creating complex mathematical relationships between tones. He is building emotional architectures that mirror our own consciousness patterns. He is making meaning song, Admiral. Perfect meaning song." Admiral Gina stared at the transmission device. She had spent her entire life studying alien species. She had cataloged their weaknesses and developed strategies to defeat them. She had never encountered a species that could create meaning song except for her own people. "Could we have been wrong about humans?" she asked. "I believe we have been very wrong," Dr. Yuna replied. "This level of artistic complexity suggests a civilization far more advanced than we assumed. We may have destroyed something irreplaceable." The human's song changed again. This time, the melody was slow and sad. It spoke of endings and goodbyes. It told the story of a people who had fought bravely, but lost everything. It was a funeral song for an entire species. Admiral Gina felt something she had never experienced. In battle, she felt regret. "Order all units to stand down," she commanded. "No one is to harm the human. We need to understand what we are dealing with." Admiral Gina stood before the great viewing window of her flagship. Below her, the planet Kepler 442b turned slowly in space. Somewhere on that world, a single human continued to sing. His voice had been broadcasting for 3 hours now, and it showed no signs of stopping. The song had changed many times. Sometimes it was sad and slow. Sometimes it was fast and joyful. Sometimes it told stories that Gina could almost understand without knowing the words. The human seemed to know hundreds of different melodies. Admiral, Dr. Yuna approached with data screens floating around her crystalline form. I have completed my analysis of the human vocal patterns. What have you learned? The human is not singing randomly. Each song follows mathematical principles that we recognize from our own meaning song traditions. But there is something more. The human songs contain sequences that suggest forms of consciousness we have never encountered. Gina turned from the window. Explain. Dr. Yuna activated a holographic display. Waves of color danced in the air, showing the structure of the human songs. Our meaning songs are based on perfect mathematical ratios. They follow the harmony of the universe. They are precise and calculated. But look at these human patterns. The display showed jagged lines and irregular curves. The human songs are imperfect. They have flaws and variations. But somehow these flaws create beauty. The imperfection is not a mistake, it is intentional. It is the source of the emotional power. Gina stared at the display. In Vorthak culture, perfection was everything. Their art, their science, their warfare, all were based on achieving perfect harmony with universal laws. The idea that imperfection could create beauty was almost impossible to understand. There is more, Admiral. The human has been singing songs from different time periods of his species' history. Some songs are ancient. They use simple patterns that suggest primitive societies. Others are complex and modern. We are hearing the entire cultural evolution of the human race. Down on the planet's surface, Minho had lost track of time. His throat was getting dry, but he kept singing. The songs were keeping him alive, not just physically, but spiritually. Each melody connected him to his people, his history, his identity as a human being. He sang the lullabies his mother had hummed while cooking dinner. He sang the protest songs from Earth's liberation movements. He sang pop music from his teenage years. He sang the hymns from his sister's wedding. Each song carried memories. Each melody told the story of humanity. Minho did not know that hundreds of Vorthak warriors were now gathered around the tower. He did not know that their entire fleet was listening to his voice. He only knew that singing felt right. It felt like the most important thing he had ever done. He began a new song. This one was from very long ago. A traditional Korean folk song about farmers working in rice fields. His grandmother had taught it to him when he was 7 years old. She had explained that their ancestors had sung this same song for over 1,000 years. On the flagship, Dr. Yuna's instruments detected something new in the transmission. Admiral, the harmonic complexity just increased dramatically. This song contains cultural information dating back centuries, possibly millennia. What does that mean? It means human civilization is far older and more sophisticated than we believed. This one human carries the cultural memory of his entire species. He is a living library of human achievement. Admiral Gina felt a cold realization growing in her mind. The Vorthak had spent 15 years destroying human colonies. They had eliminated what might have been one of the most culturally rich civilizations in the galaxy. They had been burning down libraries and calling it conquest. On the surface, Warprime Kyle received new orders through his communication device. He was to approach the human, but not as an enemy. He was to attempt communication. He was to learn. Kyle had never attempted to communicate with a species during conquest. The Vorthak way was simple: arrive, assess, conquer, utilize. Communication was unnecessary because the outcome was always the same. But everything about this situation was unprecedented. Kyle climbed the stairs slowly. Each step brought him closer to the source of the impossible music. When he reached the room where the human was hiding, he stopped at the doorway. The human sat against the far wall. His clothes were torn and bloody. His face showed exhaustion and pain. But his voice was strong and clear. He sang with his eyes closed, completely lost in the music. Kale had expected to see a typical human warrior. Aggressive, violent, dangerous even in defeat. Instead, he saw in being creating beauty in the face of death. He saw courage of a kind he had never encountered. The human finished his song and opened his eyes. When he saw Kale standing in the doorway, he did not reach for his weapon. He did not shout or try to attack. He simply looked at the Vorthak warrior with calm acceptance. "I know you cannot understand me," the human said quietly. "But I want you to know that humans are more than what you have seen in this war. We create beautiful things. We love each other. We sing." Kale did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. The human was not pleading for his life. He was not trying to surrender. He was trying to teach. Slowly, carefully, Kale activated his translation systems. The technology had been developed for interrogating prisoners, but it had never been needed before. This was the first time a Vorthak commander had ever tried to have a conversation with a conquered enemy. "Human," Kale said, his words converted into sounds the human could understand. "Why do you sing?" The human looked surprised that the alien could speak his language. Then he smiled. It was a sad smile, but also peaceful. "I sing because it is what humans do," he replied. "We make music to remember who we are. We sing to connect with each other across time and space. We sing because it makes us human." Kale felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. For 300 years, he had seen other species as obstacles to be removed or resources to be harvested. He had never considered that they might have inner lives as complex as his own. "Your songs," Kale said carefully. "They have meaning." "All songs have meaning," the human replied. "Even sad songs. Even songs about losing and dying. They help us understand our lives. They help us remember that we lived." The human began to sing again. This time he sang directly to Kale. The melody was simple and beautiful. It spoke of friendship across impossible differences. It spoke of hope, even in darkness. For the first time in his life, War Prime Kale laid down his weapon not in defeat, but in recognition. He was in the presence of something sacred, something that should be preserved, not destroyed. The news spread through the Vorthak fleet like ripples in still water. War Prime Kale had laid down his weapon. The most feared warrior in the 4th Battle Group had surrendered to a single, wounded human who could barely stand. But the reports said he had not surrendered in defeat. He had surrendered in respect. Admiral Gina paced the command deck of her flagship. In 200 years of military service, she had never faced a situation like this. Her warriors were not retreating. They were not being defeated. They were choosing to stop fighting because they had discovered something that challenged everything they believed about warfare and conquest. "Admiral," Commander Tay's voice came through the communication system. "More units are reporting the same phenomenon. Warriors across the entire invasion force are laying down weapons after hearing the human songs." "How many units?" 47 ground companies and 12 naval squadrons. "The number is growing." Gina closed her eyes. This was either the greatest military disaster in Vorthak history or the most important discovery her people had ever made. "Connect. Meet a War Prime Kale." Moments later, Kale's voice came through the speakers, but it sounded different. Calmer, more thoughtful. "Admiral, I am in the presence of the human. He has agreed to speak with us." "What is his condition?" "He is wounded but stable." "Admiral, you need to understand something. This human is not what we thought humans were. He carries knowledge and cultural wisdom that goes back thousands of years. He is like one of our keepers of memory." Gina felt a chill run through her crystalline form. Keepers of memory were the most sacred members of Vorthak society. They preserved the songs and stories that defined Vorthak civilization. They were considered living treasures more valuable than entire planets. "Kale, are you suggesting this human is equivalent to a keeper of memory?" "Admiral, I am suggesting he may be superior to our keepers. His memory contains not just facts and dates, but emotional connections to every piece of knowledge. When he sings about his people's history, he does not just recite it, he feels it. He makes others feel it too. Down on the planet's surface, Minho sat with his back against the wall, watching the strange crystalline being who had been trying to kill him just hours before. The alien had introduced himself as Kale and had been asking questions about human, music, and culture. It was the strangest conversation of Minho's life. "Your songs," Kale said through his translation device. "They speak of concepts we call family bond and heart connection, but they express these concepts in ways we have never encountered." Minho nodded slowly. "We call those things love and friendship. They are very important to humans. Your species fights wars to protect these concepts? Sometimes. We fight for many reasons. But yes, we often fight to protect the people we love." Kale's form shimmered with what Minho was learning to recognize as confusion. "We fight to expand our territory and gather resources. We fight because it is efficient." We had not considered that warfare could be motivated by emotional attachment. "What do your people fight for?" Minho asked. "Progress, order, the expansion of Vorthak civilization across the galaxy." "But why? What is the purpose of expansion?" Kale paused. It was a question he had never been asked before. In Vorthak society, expansion was simply what they did. It was their nature and their destiny. We expand because we must. It is our function in the universe. Minho studied the alien warrior. Despite his intimidating appearance, there was something almost innocent about him, like a child who had never questioned the rules he had been taught. "In one of our songs," Minho said, "there is a line that translates to, 'The purpose of life is to live meaningfully.' We believe that expansion without meaning is just empty growth." Lieutenant Nara entered the room carrying medical supplies. She had been ordered to keep the human alive while the fleet commanders decided what to do next. It was another unprecedented situation. The Vorthak had never provided medical care to an enemy before. As Nara worked on Minho's wounds, she listened to the conversation between him and Kale. She was younger than most Vorthak warriors, and more curious about other species. The human's words fascinated her. "Human Minho," she said, "your songs contain patterns that suggest your species experiences reality differently than we do. You seem to find meaning in experiences that we would consider inefficient or wasteful." "Like, what?" "You sing about watching sunsets even though they serve no practical purpose. You sing about missing people who are far away, even though such feelings cause pain. You sing about hope for the future, even when logic suggests failure is certain." Minho smiled. "Those are some of the most important things in human life. Beauty, love, hope. They give life meaning even when life is difficult." Nara's form pulsed with understanding. "You are saying that meaning is more important than efficiency?" "For humans, yes. We would rather live short, meaningful lives than long, empty ones." The conversation was being broadcast to every ship in the Vorthak fleet. Thousands of warriors listened as the wounded human explained concepts that challenged their fundamental understanding of existence. On the flagship, Admiral Gina called an emergency meeting of her senior commanders. They gathered in the strategy chamber, their crystalline forms creating a rainbow of colors as they communicated through harmonic frequencies. "We have a decision to make," Gina announced. "Do we continue with the conquest or do we halt operations to study what we have discovered?" Commander Tay spoke first. "Admiral, our mission is clear. We were sent to secure this sector for resource extraction. One human's songs do not change our objectives." "Do they not?" Dr. Yuna interjected. "This human has demonstrated that his species possesses cultural complexity equal to our own. We may have spent 15 years destroying a civilization. That could have been our greatest ally instead of our enemy." "Dr. Yuna is correct," said Commander Hana. "The human songs contain philosophical concepts that could advance our own understanding of consciousness and meaning. We should preserve this knowledge." The debate continued for hours. Some commanders argued for completing the mission. Others insisted that the discovery of human cultural sophistication changed everything. Finally, Admiral Gina made her decision. "Send orders to all units. Cease offensive operations immediately. Establish a protective perimeter around the human's location. We will initiate first contact protocols. Commander Tay's form flared with alarm. Admiral, first contact protocols are only used with species we consider equals. Are you classifying humans as equals? I am classifying this human as a person, worthy of respect, Gina replied. And if one human can create such beauty in the face of death, then perhaps we have greatly underestimated his entire species. The orders went out across the fleet. For the first time in Vorthak military history, a conquest was halted not due to enemy resistance, but due to enemy art. On the planet's surface, Minho noticed that the sounds of military activity had stopped. No more ships landing, no more troops moving through the ruins. The silence felt different now. Not the silence of death, but the silence of waiting. What happens now? He asked Kale. Now we learn, Kale replied. We learn what it means to be human. And perhaps you can learn what it means to be Vorthak. Minho began to sing again. This time he chose a song about new beginnings, about hope rising from the ashes of destruction, about the possibility that enemies could become friends. As his voice carried across the ruined city and up to the ships in orbit above, something unprecedented began to happen. Vorthak warriors, trained from birth to be perfect fighting machines, began to imagine a universe where conquest was not the only path forward. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak began to dream of peace. 3 days had passed since the Vorthak fleet stopped its attack. The communication tower that had been Minho's last refuge was now the center of the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Admiral Gina arrived on the planet's surface in a small shuttle. She had never personally visited a conquest site before. That was work for ground commanders. But this was no longer a conquest. This was something entirely new. She found Minho sitting in a chair that the Vorthak had brought for him. His wounds were healing thanks to their medical technology. Around him, dozens of Vorthak warriors sat on the floor, listening as he sang and told stories about human civilization. It looked like a classroom more than a military operation. Admiral, War Prime Kale approached and gave the traditional Vorthak greeting. The human has been teaching us about his people's history and culture. The knowledge is extraordinary. Gina looked at the wounded human. He seemed so small and fragile, compared to the Vorthak warriors around him. Yet somehow this single individual had stopped an entire invasion fleet. Human Minho, she said through her translation device. I am Admiral Gina, commander of this fleet. I have come to speak with you about what has happened here. Minho stood up slowly and bowed politely. Thank you for allowing me to live, Admiral, and thank you for listening to my songs. Your songs have caused great confusion among my people. We do not understand how organized sound can carry such power. Minho smiled. That is because you have been thinking of music as just noise. But music is a language. It speaks to parts of the mind that regular words cannot reach. It connects hearts across any distance. Dr. Yuna stepped forward. We have been analyzing the patterns in your songs. They contain information structures we recognize from our own meaning songs. But there are elements we have never seen before. What kind of elements? Emotional mathematics. Your songs create feeling equations that solve problems we did not know existed. They answer questions about the purpose of existence and the meaning of consciousness. Minho looked puzzled. I just sing the songs my grandmother taught me. I never thought of them as mathematics. That is precisely what makes them so powerful, Admiral Gina said. You create profound meaning without conscious calculation. Your songs come from something deeper than logic. Lieutenant Nara approached carrying a device Minho had never seen before. It looked like a crystal sculpture, but it glowed with internal light. This is a harmonic recorder, she explained. We use it to preserve our most important meaning songs. Would you allow us to record your songs so they can be shared with our people? Minho considered the request. A few days ago, these beings had been trying to kill him. Now they wanted to preserve his music. The change seemed impossible, but it was happening. I will share my songs, he said, but I want something in return. What do you require? Admiral Gina asked. I want to know what happened to the other human colonies. I want to know if anyone else survived." The silence that followed was heavy with regret. Finally, Admiral Gina spoke. "We destroyed them. All of them. We believed humans were a simple warrior species that posed a threat to galactic order. We were wrong." Minho felt the weight of loss settle on him like a heavy blanket. He had hoped that some humans might have escaped. He had hoped that somewhere his people still existed. "Then I really am the last human," he said quietly. "Not necessarily," Dr. Yuna said. "We detected escape ships from several colony worlds. Small groups of humans may have reached distant star systems beyond our territory. But even if that is true, human civilization as it existed is gone. Your cities, your libraries, your cultural centers, all destroyed." Minho closed his eyes. The full reality of what had been lost was almost too much to bear. Thousands of years of human achievement. Billions of lives, countless songs and stories and works of art. All gone. But then he opened his eyes and looked at the vortex surrounding him. In their crystalline forms, he saw something he had not expected to see. He saw guilt. He saw sorrow. He saw the beginning of understanding. "Maybe human civilization is not completely gone," he said slowly. "Maybe it can continue in a different way." "What do you mean?" Admiral Gina asked. "You want to preserve my songs. You want to learn about human culture. Maybe the best way to honor what was lost is to make sure it is never forgotten." Minho stood up and walked to the center of the group. "I propose an exchange. I will teach your people everything I know about human culture. In return, you teach me about Vorthak civilization. We create something new, a bridge between our peoples." War Prime Kale's form shimmered with excitement. "You would share your cultural knowledge with former enemies? If you promise that knowledge will be used to create instead of destroy, yes." Admiral Gina felt something she had never experienced before. Hope. Not hope for victory or conquest, but hope for understanding and growth. "The Vorthak Empire has never attempted cultural integration with another species," she said. "We do not know if it is possible." "Then let us find out," Minho replied. "Let us try something that has never been tried before." Over the following weeks, the most unusual partnership in galactic history began to form. Minho taught Vorthak warriors about human music, poetry, and philosophy. In return, they shared their knowledge of science, mathematics, and the harmonic principles that governed their society. The results were extraordinary. Minho learned to create meaning songs that combined human emotion with Vorthak mathematical precision. The songs were unlike anything either species had produced before. They spoke to the mind and heart simultaneously, creating understanding on levels that neither humans nor Vorthak had previously imagined. The Vorthak, meanwhile, began to understand concepts like love, hope, and sacrifice not as weaknesses to be eliminated, but as sources of strength and meaning. They started to see that their centuries of conquest had been driven by a fear of meaninglessness, and that they had been destroying the very thing they had been searching for. Admiral Gina sent reports to the Vorthak High Command that shook the Empire to its foundations. She recommended that all conquest operations be suspended while they reevaluated their understanding of other species. She suggested that the Empire's greatest achievements might come not from domination, but from cooperation. The response from the High Command was swift and shocking. Admiral Gina was relieved of command and ordered to return to the homeworlds for judgment. The Empire was not ready for such radical changes, but the lower-ranking Vorthak who had experienced Minho's songs refused to abandon what they had learned. Led by War Prime Kyle and Lieutenant Nara, they declared themselves independent from the Empire. They would stay in this star system and continue the great experiment in interspecies cooperation. It was a rebellion born not of anger, but of hope. Minho found himself in an impossible position. He was no longer just the last human. He was the first human ambassador to a new kind of civilization. A civilization built on the idea that different species could learn from each other instead of destroying each other. Months passed. The rebel, Vorthak established a permanent settlement on Kepler 442b. They called it New Harmony. It became a place where former enemies worked together to create something unprecedented. Minho's health improved, but he never stopped singing. His voice became the foundation of a new form of art that combined the best of both civilizations. Young Vorthak came from across the galaxy to learn from him. Some came in secret, defying the Empire's orders. One day, as Minho stood on a hill overlooking New Harmony, Lieutenant Nara approached him. "Human Minho," she said, "I have received a message that will interest you." "What kind of message?" "A transmission from the Outer Rim territories. Human survivors have established a colony near the Andromeda border. They are calling for any surviving humans to join them." Minho felt his heart race. Other humans were alive. His people had not been completely destroyed. "They want me to come to them?" he asked. "The choice is yours. We have ships that could take you there safely." Minho looked down at the settlement below. Vorthak and the few other alien refugees who had joined them worked side by side. They were building something new and beautiful, something that had never existed before. "What if I stayed here instead?" he asked. "What if I invited them to come here?" Nara's form glowed with understanding. "You want to build a bridge between the scattered human survivors and our people?" "I want to build a bridge between all peoples who choose cooperation over conquest. Humans, Vorthak, and any other species that wants to try a different way of living." As the sun set over New Harmony that evening, Minho began to sing. His voice carried across the settlement and up to the ships in orbit. But this time, he was not singing alone. Vorthak voices joined his, creating harmonies that had never existed before. The song they created together spoke of loss and healing, of endings and beginnings, of the possibility that even the greatest tragedies could become the foundation for something better. It was a song of hope for the future, a song that proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe is not destruction, but creation. And in the growing darkness of space, other voices began to answer, human voices from distant colonies, alien voices from species that had heard the story of the singing human and wanted to learn more. And in the growing darkness of space, other voices began to answer, human voices from distant colonies, alien voices from species that had heard the story of the singing human and wanted to learn more. The rebellion was spreading. The galaxy was changing. And it all began with one man's decision to sing instead of surrender. The last human in the war had become the first human in the peace.